Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Northpointe Plus.
Lucky 13.
Yeah, lucky number 13. We'll see where everything goes after this episode. It could go really well or all downhill.
13 is full of wonder.
Oh, well, I see what you did there. This is our follow-up podcast for those that may be unfamiliar. We have our messages and our gatherings on Sunday mornings, and this podcast is an opportunity for us to gather together again virtually to answer questions, to continue the conversation. It's a blast. We love doing it. So you can submit questions through the app, and then we'll try to get through as many as we can.
And if you don't, I get to preach for another 20 minutes. Something like that.
Yeah, so which do you want more?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm one of your hosts, Mark Adkins. To my left, Rick Rubel. Rick, we just kicked off our Christmas series. What's it all about?
What's it all about, anyhow? The theme for this series is a Christmas Uncluttered.
Yeah.
Removing to make space for what really matters.
Yeah.
And so the first part of the message, I just talked about how important that is to clear stuff out and to make space. And this particular week, we talked about removing busy and exchanging that for wonder, for really working this Christmas in particular to try and recreate, reestablish, regain, to experience wonder, because it's such a waste to go through Christmas and to get to the end and never really have encountered how much God loves us.
Yeah. And you think about, typically when you think about opposites, you're exchanging busyness. You think about the opposite of busy is just not busy. It's nothingness. But really, that's not what we're missing. We're not missing out on nothingness. We're missing out on the opportunity to be in awe and in wonder and to engage with the people around us, the things that are happening around us. So I'm super excited. And we have this cool Christmas walkthrough experience that helps people do that. So if you haven't come to that yet, that happens Fridays and Saturdays this coming weekend and next weekend from 6 to 8 p.m. It's awesome. It's so nice and quiet.
And if you're watching in the future virtually, too bad.
You missed that. you can no longer unclutter.
That's right.
You're stuck.
I will say this kind of before we jump into talking about this week's message. It really was a very fun thing to think about. Okay, what are the things that characterize Christmas? Yeah. And are they really the right things? And what kind of things do we need to swap out for something else? Yeah. When you're speaking, you check synonyms for different words to try and find the words that are the right words to communicate what you want. Yep. And so I was doing the synonym search for exchange, trade, swap. What is it that we need to get rid of something and replace it with something else? And so the whole concept of busy versus wonder, I thought was the right thing, because it gets really easy to just miss it at Christmas time, to miss the wonder piece.
Yeah, and and you touched on this in your message too. I think that concept of intentionally removing so that you have space to add is really important, because our culture just likes to add. Just put more stuff on it. Fill your calendar, fill your to-do list, fill your purchase list for shopping for gifts and all of that. And you never stop to think, do I have to do this? Should I be doing this? Is this worth doing at all?
Right. And lots of times we experience something really cool. Like we go for the first time to an event or an experience or whatever and think, this is so good, that you think then every year, that's what you have to do without really realizing that it's lost its wonder. Part of its wonder was that it was new and fresh. Yeah. And again, if I go back to the light experience, one of the things that I love about our approach as a staff and leadership at Northpointe is we sat down this year and said, what we did last year with the drive-through experience, that was so good and so appropriate for last year in the midst of COVID, where everybody's concerned about, say, social distancing and all of that stuff. And that this year, while all those things are true, people are in a different place, and we needed a different kind of experience. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited. So if you haven't come to it yet, there's 2 more weekends. It's a blast. If you have come to it, come again.
Yeah.
There's always more
Come
hot
and enjoy.
cocoa.
Yep.
It's a blast.
Yeah.
So this first question's a real hard.
Before we get to the first question, there was a question submitted so that you know that Mark doesn't want to answer, but I think you need to.
That's one way of characterizing it.
I think you need to ask the question as it was submitted.
A question came in
Yes.
asking, was that Mark Adkins playing electric guitar? If so, go Mark. It was my evil twin that we gave the opportunity to just play on a Sunday. He tried out. We're not so sure how it went.
Mark was out of the sound and tech booth and on stage playing the electric guitar.
Yes, it's
That's
a blast.
fun.
Love doing it.
Yep.
So yes, it was me.
Good.
You found
Because
me
it's
out.
not going to be me. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, so now that hard-hitting journalism is out of the way.
That's absolutely the inquiring minds want to know.
Yes.
Thank you, Donna Seeger, for that question.
This, I think, was a question that even in conversation that I've had with people about this theme that we're doing of A Christmas Uncluttered, this question came in and asks, are there circumstances when busyness creates wonder? So we had talked about in the message, you have to remove busyness in your life, and that's how you make space for wonder. But are there circumstances where busyness can create wonder?
I think that the answer to that is yes, in that sometimes we're going, and something just like hits us in the middle of the face, and it causes us. What's it cause us to do? I think in the midst of the busyness, it causes us to stop and reflect.
Yep.
And so it can happen out of that. That's not the path that I would recommend, to make things so busy that the wonder is accidental.
Yeah.
God does enough of accidental wonder into our life. And I think that he can bring that in easier when our schedule is not quite so packed. And so making space to be able to experience that, removing some of the busyness so that we're more attentive. Because sometimes I think there is wonder all over the place.
Yep.
And we just miss it because we're going too fast.
Yeah, and I think it's about fighting this. We've talked about this. It's about fighting this mentality that our culture has of just more. And so even in my mind, I wrestle with this, where it's like, well, if I'm doing more things, I have more opportunity to encounter things that I have wonder about. And I like the phrase that you just used about not encountering wonder accidentally, not just stumbling into it where it's, my calendar is filled, my whole day is filled. And I might stumble into it every now and then. But am I really intentionally seeking wonder, specifically what we're talking about? Like, am I seeking Jesus throughout my day?
Yeah.
Because I can stumble upon him, sure. But is that really the point, is just to stumble upon Jesus every now and then?
Right. I think it's so much more effective to be looking for how God's working. We've been talking about that for a year and a half now.
Yeah.
But to be looking for how Jesus is working in your life and say, oh, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
As opposed to, going to the end of the day or the end of the month or whatever and saying, I'm just worn out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads to, one of the concepts you had talked about, exchanging busyness for wonder, is this concept of Sabbath, which we had talked about, I think earlier this year.
Yeah.
You had preached on the Sabbath. And this is a great question, because inevitably when anyone talks about Sabbath or giving or anything, we try to align it into our lives, and if it doesn't align perfectly how it's talked about, then we think, we're failing and we haven't checked the box right. So this question comes in: how do you keep a Sabbath day of rest when you and your spouse work weekends, you work opposite shifts, night shift versus day shift, and on top of that you work 12-hour shifts, so you might not even see each other throughout the day? So how, with couples, how do you balance that, and how do you actually take a Sabbath? And that question submitted by a cop and a nurse. So very different schedules. Schedules can change week to week. How do you balance that?
I think that it's really difficult.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to figure that out. I think it does help to recognize that there are seasons that you go through, and that the appeal of balance, perfect balance, it's a mirage.
Yeah.
You can't really get that. And so there are seasons that things are better, and things in seasons that you go through to just kind of work through it to get to the other place. I do think that for a cop and a nurse who are married to each other, you got to be really intentional to figure out when you're going to spend time together and how to do that. And I think that if there's a way that in the mixing of your schedules, you can say, okay, we experience this many hours on a typical day that we're able to be together. Figure out when that is, and then maximize it. Maximize it in terms of Sabbath. We were talking ahead of time about when I was working on the message, just studying about Jewish perspective of Sabbath in our current culture, not New Testament times, but in our current culture. And while they still, many Jews, especially the devout Jews that honor Sabbath in a very particular way, and try and do it according to the Old Testament law. What they really try and create is an opportunity to have a day together where they can experience family and joy and God in that context. And so they do prep ahead of time so that it's free when they're together. And so for the cop and the nurse, I think that's a really cool concept to say, okay, we know that we're going to have these 6 hours or these 8 hours that, maybe it's from 4 a.m. until noon on a particular day. And we want to carve that out to rest and to enjoy being together as a family without any other distractions, and to really let God speak into that experience. And so what you do is on the other times, you're doing all the laundry, you're doing all the stuff. And even I think if I can integrate some of the ideas from the message that you do in that family time, in that date night, that date morning, that whatever that experience is, that you free as many things up so that you can do that together, and that God can be a part of that, and that you're not, because that's the time that you have together, you're not doing errands together, you're not filling responsibilities, and you're not just checking off, oh, this is our date night, that you're really finding wonder in that time that you have together. It is interesting, I think, that in terms of what the Old Testament teaches about Sabbath, that there is a sense of Sabbath for the community, but there's also a sense of Sabbath for an individual. So when God says, I'm going to give you this gift, it really was for everybody to experience together, but there's a sense in which it's for an individual too, and so you create Sabbath so that you can be a better spouse, better husband, better wife.
And we were even talking before we were recording about how, and I'm certainly guilty of this, that to really understand, we had talked about Sabbath basically means stop.
Right.
There's a sense of the word where it means stop doing, just stop.
Right.
And we don't like
Whoa,
that.
No.
We, even in talking, and again, I'm holding myself to this, like I'm bad at this, where the thought of just doing nothing is like, gosh, that's so boring. Like I want to do something. Maybe I'll read, or maybe I'll catch up on the news, or maybe I'll, I like to draw or to paint or do, I like to do those things. And I think that's good. There's a place for that, certainly, where that's restful, that's rejuvenating. I can find wonder in that. And at the same time, I really do think that's something that we need to wrestle with as a church does there come a point where I actually do need to just stop, even for a little bit, maybe a minute or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and just stop and rest and let God minister to me and speak to me, and again, we tend to go to the point where I think, well, if I'm just doing nothing, if I'm just stopping, I have to go to a dark room, turn off all the lights, sit in the corner, face the wall, and then I'm doing nothing. And that's not really what that concept of Sabbath stopping means.
Right. We tend to be so busy that if we stop, this is my experience yesterday afternoon. Preached 2 services, gave blood afterwards, went to lunch with Deb, went back home, turned on the football game, and stopped. And fell asleep. Our deal is when we stop, we usually are so tired that we just sleep. And part of the benefit, and I tried to say this in the message yesterday, is that that it's not just a stop for the sake of stopping, but it's a stopping so that we can reflect, so that we can experience that wonder. You can't, we don't very often stop and wrestle with the thoughts that are going around in our mind. Whether those thoughts are about the goodness of God, whether they're about areas that God is dealing with us in, whether they're about relationships that are either so fulfilling or sometimes so broken that they need to deal with. Most of the time when we stop, we either sleep or we start writing, okay, this needs done, this needs done, this needs done. And it really is that concept of experience and wonder. In order to do that, we've got to pause and we've got to reflect.
Yeah. When I even think about, what's so cool about what God sets up is that he models Sabbath rest for us.
Yeah.
And obviously God is different than us in that God doesn't need to sleep.
Right.
So when, God created the earth and then had his time of rest, it doesn't mean that he literally shut his eyes, turned away from the earth, but there's a resting that takes place. And so I think for us, can sleep be a part of that? Sure. It will always be there.
I
wonder, having that moment of not just falling asleep, that's not what Sabbath rest means.
Sorry, jumped on top of you.
No, you're good.
When you think about, okay, what did God do on the seventh day?
Yeah.
I think at some level he experienced wonder.
Yeah.
I think he just kind of looked and said, wow, look at those giraffes eating from those trees. Wow, look at those rhinos doing their thing in the mud. Look at the elephants taking a bath. Look at Adam and Eve and what they're doing in the garden. That's just so cool. I think that God reveled in his creation, and that was his sense of rest. There really was just this cool sense of what had happened.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. Well, that's all I got.
Yeah, just one other thing that I wanted to share that I think is important. It's easy. It's hard for us to create time for wonder, and I think that we need to do that at Christmas, especially because there really are many opportunities for us to just see things and go, "Wow, that's so cool." But it gets easy for us to have a task list.
Yep.
And one of the things that we were talking about just in the message, if you watched the message yesterday, I got choked up both services talking about holding our daughter Gabe that Christmas in '93, and just keep saying wonder, but the amazing thing that God came to earth in the form of a baby, and that. As a parent, once you start having kids and they're going through the stuff, you're trying to create experiences for them to experience wonder. And lots of times as a parent, you're all about the experience and think, okay, check that off. We went to the light display. Check that off. We went to Silver Bells.
Yep.
Check that off. We went to the whatever. And the difference between a parent and a grandparent is most grandparents see things through the eyes of their grandchildren. Yeah. And so all of a sudden, what's the difference between parents going for a walk with their kids and grandparents going for a walk? The parents are thinking, I've got all these things I got to do. Yes, we need to go for a walk as a family. We're going to do it. A grandparents, the kid is saying, look at these ants. And the grandparents looking down and saying, isn't that amazing what those ants are doing? Where do you think they're going? What's he carry? How's he carry all that? Yeah. They're experiencing things through the eyes of their grandchildren, and that's I think the thing that we need to capture is that there really is an opportunity to experience this Christmas through the eyes of people who are experiencing it for the first time. And the same thing is true. I think if you encounter someone who is very new in their relationship with Jesus, and they experience Christmas and recognize that God came to earth, their celebration of Christmas is radically different than people who are just going through the motions of stuff. So,
Yeah, that's great. I love it. So I'm excited to keep working through a Christmas Uncluttered.
Yep.
And see all the other stuff that we can remove and make space for the things that matter, make space for family, make space for Jesus, those are great things.
And so in the vein of less is more and less busy, shorter podcast.
There you go.
Amen.
That's our gift to you.
There you go.
Merry Christmas. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for submitting questions. Keep the conversation going. Like and share the video. Subscribe. We love interacting on social media and keeping the conversation going. So thanks for doing that. Rick, thanks for your time.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Number 14.
Woo.